Hey guys! So if you've seen my videos before, you might know that my partner loves Runescape. We have this magnet I made for him on the fridge that says no XP waste, and we even have this Runescape kind of live, love, laugh style poster in our house. In this player-owned house, we teleport with ease. We say, "Buying GF, please." In general, I love to make gifts for people, so I had this idea that maybe I could make a RuneScape themed sweater or something for him for Christmas. I have this embroidery machine which is behind me, and I've made some custom designs with it before, so I had this idea that I could do some RuneScape themed designs and put that on a sweater for him. If you're watching this thinking, wow, you're so organized and ahead, it's only August. Well, it was supposed to be for last Christmas. This took me a really long time, probably about a year at this point. So my hair also changes a lot throughout the footage, so just ignore that. My initial design plan was to put every skill icon on the back of a sweater, but when I actually sat down to kind of look at what that design would look like, I realized it would be way too crammed on there. I was going for something that would be a little bit subtle, so it would actually be something that he could wear on a normal day, and having all 28 skills on the back of a sweater seemed like way too much. So I ended up deciding that I would do skill icons just down each arm of the sweater, and I figured that I could probably get 4 on each arm without looking too crammed. So I asked him his 8 favorite skills and went with those. What he ended up telling me was Slayer, Range, Magic, Rune Crafting, Herb Lore, Fishing, Prayer, and to make the pattern files, I used a program called Inkscape, which is an open source program that has a lot of the same functionality as Adobe Illustrator. And there's also an extension called Inkstitch that is meant for embroidery. Since it's open source, it does crash a little bit. It's not extremely stable, but I do think it's overall preferable to using Adobe because I just don't want to do the subscription fee. So how I usually start with the patterns is I bring in the image and use the trace bitmap function. Unfortunately, this rounds it out a lot, and in this case we want that pixel art style so it'll still look like the RuneScape icon, so I had to do a lot of manual tweaking. Since we're looking to embroider this, we can't set it up like actual square pixels because the different shapes need to connect for the embroidery machine to read it properly. Inkstitch also has some troubleshooting functionality that I use to make sure that the shape is actually embroiderable. Sometimes there's weird things like edges crossing over each other that would cause an error in the embroidery machine, but it looks totally normal just when you look at it. My embroidery machine only embroiders one color at a time, so I tried to keep the amount of colors for each icon relatively low, down to about 4 or 5 colors. I also had to simplify things a little bit, especially when it came to details that I thought wouldn't come through when I embroidered it. You might also notice that the colors on the design aren't exact, and that's because I'm using the colors that I specifically have thread for. So basically I'm just looking for whichever thread I have that is the closest to the right color. Some of them are not super close. For example, the magic one, I really don't have that color purple, so I had to go with kind of a navy instead. I keep the colors in their own little folders just so that I can order them properly, just to make sure I don't have to change out the thread more than I have to, because once the file gets put into the embroidery machine, it will embroider in the order of the layers. Then once I think I'm ready, I can use this function to preview what the embroidery process will look like. So I did the same process for all 8 skill icons, which is part of the reason it took so long. I also ended up having to go back and tweak some of the files because I ran into some issues with the embroidery, like gaps between the colors or the opposite problem where the stitch density was way too high. I'm not that experienced at this, so I often run into problems like that when I embroider, but I think someone who is more used to working with different fabrics would know immediately what they need to change. For my machine, I need to save it as a PES file, but there are a lot of different file types for embroidery. I guess it just depends on the machine. It basically just blocks together the colors in the same order that my layers were from my original file, and then adds some commands for the machine like when to cut the thread. Then all I need to do is put this file on a USB drive and we're good to go. To prepare for embroidering, I need to use the embroidery hoop, my fabric, which I'm using an old pair of jeans for this, and then stabilizer. Denim is really good for embroidery because it's really densely woven and the fabric doesn't stretch as much as some other fabrics. So I'm not sure if I even need stabilizer here because that stretching is what stabilizer is meant to prevent, but I'm using it anyway. This square stabilizer I have is almost the exact same size as my hoop, so I should probably use something else, but I bought a big pack of it, so I'm trying to use it up as best as I can. It's really finicky to line it up right though. When I turn on the machine, I can just choose my USB drive and it'll show me all the patterns that I've made and loaded on there. Then I just select the one I want and can choose the size and start embroidering. It will tell me all the thread colors that are included in the design and will also let me know when I need to go in and change them out. I do have to manually rethread the machine, but it does thread the needle for me, so that's nice. I mentioned before that some of my embroidery failed because the stitch density was too high. Well, this one is what that looks like. I set this one up to go and then left the room, and when I came back and saw this, I was very upset. All I had to do was change some settings, but it definitely discouraged me. So now we have all the patches, and I just have to carefully cut them out and then defray the edges. I use a combination of burning the edges and this kind of weird fray protector liquid. So I got this sweater from the thrift store. It's just like a black turtleneck, kind of a lot like the one I'm wearing right now actually. I wanted black because the background of all of my embroidery is black, so it'll blend in better. I wanted to get something from the thrift store just because I was worried I'd ruin it, and that's the same reason I didn't embroider straight onto this and I embroidered patches instead, because some of the patches that I embroidered didn't work out the first time, so I actually had to do a couple, and if I did it on this, I would have just ruined it immediately. So I'm just going to take these and sew them on the arms on the side, kind of like that. And my plan is to have the combat ones on one side, and then the other type skills on the other side. So I'll have range, prayer, magic, and slayer on one side, and then I'll have fishing, rune crafting, thieving, and herb lore on the other side. And they'll be going down the side of the arm like this, so kind of like this. So that's my plan. We'll see how it turns out. So my plan was I was gonna sew these on by hand. The patches are really thick because it's denim plus a big layer of embroidery plus a layer of stabilizer. So it was really difficult to get the needles through the patch to actually sew them on. And I injured myself many times, as well as breaking 4 or 5 needles throughout this process. It also hurt my hand a lot to sew these on, so I took my time spacing these out, which again is part of the reason it took so long to get this done. So I finished sewing everything on. I have the non-combat on this arm. So while I was editing this part, I realized that I actually sewed on the rune crafting one upside down. Yeah. So, ignore that. And then the combat on this arm. I think it turned out pretty well. It's clearly hand sewn, but it still looks pretty good. I think the moral of the story for me is to actually think about how long this would take, because the designs alone took me months. But at least now I have those designs that I can use and embroider on other things if I want to. I'm really happy with the end result though. I know it looks very handmade and definitely has its flaws, but I'm okay with that and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I really like crafting and I think it'd be fun to make more videos that are kind of combining crafting with gaming, so I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.